Hey everyone, Beardo speaking, and you are watching an episode of MINUTIA Minute. This is actually going to be a quick video response to Sleepyreader 666. He asked the question, who's more important, the artist or the writer in a comic book? And he cited a particular article on comicresources.com that was talking about how sort of artists really get shortchanged, and then he sort of went on and talked about how like it kind of goes in phases, and in the early 90s there was like the Jim Lees and the Todd McFarlanes and dare I say it, the Rob Liefelds that made sort of artists like the big thing, and then later people like Brian Michael Bendis, Ed Brubaker, etc., made writers the big thing again. And I just find this to be a really, really fascinating subject because it's a really tough question to answer, and it's a really complex relationship. I'm not going to cop out and not give an answer. I am going to give an answer, but I am going to explain it a little bit, which is why I wanted to do a video response rather than just write a little comment. And I'm going to say the writer is more important. And I'm going to compare it to, like, a director and a cinematographer on a movie. You know what I mean? The cinematographer, is getting sort of what the writer has sort of culled together in their mind and, presenting them with what they want to see. But they can't create that image for themselves. So, it's a highly symbiotic relationship. And it's, I don't want to shortchange artists either here. It's very, very close. But I would say, ultimately, it's the writer's job to hold everything together and create a singular vision. And that's why it's really symbiotic, though. So to kind of illustrate my point, I wanted to talk about sort of what makes a good writer, what makes a bad writer, and kind of clarify why the writer should be more important than the artist. And I would actually argue that, an artist that's really worth his salt would actually probably agree with that to some degree, because the fact of the matter is, if you're a really solid artist and you're reading their book, you shouldn't really know that the artist is doing their job. It should just sort of be part of the reading experience of a comic. And that's not to say that you shouldn't go through and appreciate the art in comics. That's definitely not what I'm trying to say here. But what I am saying is that, I shouldn't be reading a comic book and then get preoccupied with, how many hairs are on a certain character's arm. You know what I mean? And, I love Jim Lee and I love, detailed comics like that, but at the same time, the art should never take away from the story. It should never distract from the story that you're experiencing. And you should be able to sort of, go back and look at it from multiple different ways and sort of appreciate the art singularly, but it shouldn't get in the way of your experience of the comic book, especially on your first time reading it through. So a really good person I want to point out to sort of illustrate kind of what I'm trying to get at here is Jeff Loeb, because Jeff Loeb really shows how important it is to have a good writer and artist team that really communicates with each other and really fits the same goal. Because Jeff Loeb is one of those guys where, he's written, for example, Batman. And I love Batman. Jeff Loeb's Batman stuff is some of the best Batman stuff that I've ever read. But the thing about it is he has a lot of very different interpretations of Batman out there. And it really depends on who his artist is. He really tailors his work to the art. So when you read something like Batman: The Long Halloween, he's a very dark film noir type Batman. He has a very brooding, very tormented. And if you go through and look, it fits the art, which is black. Look at it. I don't know if you're even seeing pictures right now on the camera. You might just be seeing just darkness. And it's all very dark and brooding. There's a cool shot of the Scarecrow there. Now, contrast that to the popcorn extravaganza that is Batman Hush. The Batman in Batman Hush and the Batman in The Long Halloween are really very, very different characters. They're in very, very different places. They both ring true as Batman, but, I mean, they really seem like completely different interpretations. However, they're both written very masterfully so, in my opinion, by Jeff Loeb, and it's because, you know, he tailors his writing to the artist to make it all fit together in the grand scheme of things. And when that doesn't happen, it's not going to be a good book. And that's why I'm giving the writer a little bit more credit, because they're really the ones sort of steering the ship, and it really is their responsibility to, you know, make sure everything fits together, and that they're writing, you know, to their first audience, really, which is the artist. Now, to give you a bad example, let's look at another Batman book with Batman and Robin, The Boy Wonder, issue number 1. And I honestly didn't think that I would be pulling this book out anytime soon. But, I mean, this is really a bad example of what I'm talking about. So, I mean, it's the combination of Frank Miller and Jim Lee. And, I mean, they're both visionary in their own right. Frank Miller has done some of the best Batman stuff as well. However, this book, I think it's no secret, did not click on any level. And the reason for that is because, you know, Frank Miller really has his own voice, and it doesn't fit in Jim Lee's world. And Frank Miller isn't the type who's going to adapt to Jim Lee's style and, you know, make it meld together very well. The reason why Frank Miller and Jim Lee got together at all is because it was going to be Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee doing this book, but then when Jeff Loeb went to Marvel, DC said, well, we're creating this new all-star run, we need an all-star creator, let's get Frank Miller. And so, you know, it wasn't a marriage made out of artistic necessity, but out of just sort of DC's need to put together, you know, a high-profile book that we were all going to go pick up in May of that year, or whatever time it came out. So, as a result, I mean, this book is a mess. I mean, honestly, Jim Lee's artwork in it looks good, but it just doesn't fit the story at all. And there are points where it doesn't just figuratively not fit, it literally doesn't fit. There are times in here, and I leafed through this before I did this video, I couldn't find the picture, but there's like one particular point where Batman is like cackling like a crazed maniac, because that's how Frank Miller is writing Batman in this story. And Jim Lee has him sort of gritting his teeth, and he's, you know, acting all badass, because that's how Jim Lee knows how to interpret Batman. And, you know, and that's why Jeff Loeb writes him like a badass in Batman Hush, because that's how Jim Lee interprets Batman. Whereas in The Long Halloween, Jeff Loeb gives him a more detective and more sort of film noir style, because that's what Tim Sale is good at. So, you know, long story short, you know, the artist is absolutely integral, and it's a totally symbiotic relationship between them both. But at the same time, the writer should really be the person steering the ship. Now, there are certain writers that have really, really distinct voices, and they're really voices that are uncompromising. Alan Moore comes to mind. But the important thing to remember with Alan Moore is that he really picks artists that work within his style. He doesn't pick, you know, he wouldn't work on a book with Jim Lee. I find that highly unlikely. And it's not because Alan Moore hates Jim Lee, I have no idea, but it's because he doesn't fit into the storytelling that Alan Moore likes to write within. So again, you know, the writer's really steering the ship here. Alan Moore is a brilliant writer, and he may not be like Jeff Loeb, he may not be sort of a chameleon that fits with a lot of different artists, but he's a smart enough writer to know that he needs to damn well make sure that he gets the right artist for the job. So, again, I have to say, the writer is the most important of them all. And I guess that basically is my whole point. I was going to show one other thing, too. This is another Jeff Loeb example, but just to sort of nail the point home, a really good example of sort of how the writer drives the art, or how the writer is driven by the artist, but is also in charge, is Jeff Loeb's run on Batman Superman. So, with, you know, the first set of issues, it was Jeff Loeb and Ed McGuinness, and it was, you know, balls to the wall fist fight with every bad guy out there. I mean, it was just a free-for-all. And some of the good guys, too, as you can see. It's been a long time since I read these. And, you know, that's what Ed McGuinness is really good at writing. And then you had this one-off with Pat Lee. I don't honestly remember the specifics of that. It was kind of a filler issue. And then you get to Michael Turner, and, you know, Michael Turner is really great at writing women, and all of a sudden we've got a Supergirl storyline that sort of pops up. And so, you know, again, Jeff Loeb is really tailoring his art to his audience. And I'll just kind of keep showing these, because we're on a roll here. Why not? There's issue 12. And issue 13. And then again, you know, the type of story Jeff Loeb changes yet again with Carlos Pacheco on art. And you sort of get this sort of dystopia kind of, you know, Flashpoint, alternate reality kind of a story. There's issue 18. And another one-off issue, something to do with Supergirl. But again, you know, Ian Churchill is sort of famous for his women as well, and it's no accident that this is a Supergirl issue. And then, of course, we get back to Ed McGuinness for Loeb's sort of final run-through. And, again, you know, it's a character tour de force where you get all kinds of different incarnations of Batman and Superman, and it's an all-out punch-out brawl. So, anyway, here's issue 25, and then finally the series wrapped up with 26. And so there you have it. That's my video response slash showing off my Superman Batman books in response to Sleepyreader 666 question of who's more important, the writer or the artist. I say the writer, but again, it's a completely symbiotic relationship. Can't really pick one over the other and be fair. So there you have it. That's what I think. Let me know what you think down below, and head over to Sleepyreader's channel and tell him what you think. Because I think it's a great question, so weigh in, guys. I'm curious to hear what you think.